Welcome back to this third and final installment of today's show of InfoWars Nightly News. Today's date is October 3rd, 2012. I'm your host, Rob Dew, and as I promised at the end of the last segment, sitting next to me is one of the leading food industry experts, Steve Shenk, and he has come to talk about a whole host of issues, and so we're just going to get right to it. Steve, how's it going today?
Hey, it's good to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So we were talking earlier just about a myriad of food problems that are going on. You came in here and did 2 interviews with Alex, and you guys, I guess, scratched the surface on it, but, you know, there's so many issues involved with food because it's everywhere in our lives. It's part of everything. And we were talking about the price of bacon and what's going on with that.
You don't have to talk about the price of bacon anymore.
Yeah.
Because there ain't going to be none.
I like bacon, too.
Yeah, well, so do I. I was raised on a farm, and you have to understand that what we're getting right now is a reaction of the media, and the media is always very slow to bring out news that might reflect badly on the present administration, particularly in an election year. Mm-hmm. So if the news media is coming out and saying, guys, there's not going to be any more bacon, there's not going to be any more pork in a very short period of time because we've had this serious drought, which Alex and your whole team and I have been talking about for quite some time. Right. We're in the 7th year of this thing. But what's going to happen is a lot of times people have not realized the impact on their food budget. They all know that it's going up like crazy. They all know that 20,000 people a day in the United States are falling below the poverty line in the ability to buy their own groceries. We've got about half the population right now that needs some sort of subsidization for their grocery budget, whether it's from the church or the government or whatever source it is. And so you put that all together, and it's kind of like the old story about cooking frogs. You know, you put a frog in cold water and you turn up the heat, and by the time it gets hot enough,
it's too late.
It's too late. Yeah. And so what's happening is it's too late. And when the farm market reports come out for October, mm-hmm. which indicates what kind of crops we've got coming on this year, the news media have already picked it up and are presetting the population of the country for the fact there's not going to be any more bacon.
Yeah, they've been setting the table for this.
That's right, setting the table.
There you go.
That's not good.
No, it's not.
But anyway, the fact is that what we've got is we've got a drought. It's knocking out the corn crop. Mm-hmm. A high percentage of corn crop. Some people estimate this about 70%. Well, when you look at the percentages of corn that has been allocated to ethanol to put in our gas tank,
mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
that's what? That's 40%. Okay, you got another 40%. That's what? Left for animal feed, and right. 20% for people.
Yeah.
Well, what folks don't realize is that portion that goes for animal feed is what provides their poultry and all their livestock, because that's animal feed that is being restructured away from our food supply. So the pork is just the beginning. You've got to understand, when you get into third world countries, what they grow is not beef. They aren't growing large quantities of dairy cattle and this type of thing. When you've got the little farm that's just barely surviving, that's just barely making it, they raise hogs and chickens. You can fatten out a hog in one season and get it ready for market. It's going to take a couple seasons to get a head of beef up to speed. So the pork is indicative of the protein source of a country going down and down and disappearing. And when the news media comes out, and they're already at the point where they're saying there isn't going to be any, or people will definitely not be able to afford it, what happens to those families that are falling below the poverty line every day in this country when we've got 50 million people on food stamps, and that doesn't count all of the people that are getting subsidization of their food budget out of other places?
Right.
So we've got some serious stuff going on.
Oh, and protein is one of the main sources of food that you need. And they make the USDA pyramid, which shows lots of carbohydrates, which, you know, that's really not what you need more of. You need protein, fruits, and vegetables, and mainly protein and vegetables.
Well, and the interesting thing is that as a result of this, as a result of the families that are losing ground with being able to afford the protein sources, what they're going for is high percentages of carbohydrates in their diet, and so their balance is off. And that's why you can measure a high percentage of the population's butts and axe handles. And at the same time, we've got some key people in the White House that are saying we have to do something about the weight of our country, and we need to monitor what people are eating so that we can deal with this weight problem, this health problem, because it's going to affect our health care program. And we've got 17 pages in the health care program that addresses what people can and cannot eat. And all of this is counterproductive.
Oh, yeah.
You bring the people to an economic level where they can't afford the food, and so they go to carbohydrates, their butts get wide, and then you complain about the fact that they're having health problems with all the diabetes and all these types of things, and it's going to affect the health care program. And so we don't want to charge you for everybody's health care that's fat. And so where does it all end?
Right. Well, yeah, I tell you where it ends. It ends in the trash can. We just covered a story today how the kids aren't eating the vegetables that they're being given at school, or I guess they're paying for. And so they want to put cameras on the trash cans to see what type of food they're throwing away. I mean, it's just, the nanny state has just gotten out of control. And you know, there's one mother there that they interview, and she says, well, you know, it's not the school's job to make these kids eat. It's the parents' job to feed these kids properly. So when they get to school, they're eating the things. I mean, let's not even get into the school problem as it is now, but just the whole notion that it's the government's job. They think they have to control everything all along the way. And like you said, they're going to get into this food issue when there's no food around. What are they going to do?
Well, the interesting thing is that the government doesn't have any food reserves. Absolutely none. Now, a lot of people assume that the government is going to feed them. Where does the food come from that the government feeds them with? It's not coming from the government. They don't have any food reserves. So what's going to ultimately happen is that the people right now who can afford their food are paying dearly for it. The people who can't afford the food, that food is being channeled over to the people, and who's paying for it? I think we were talking before we came on this program about the fact that right now every person in the country is being charged to give the people who can't afford them cell phones.
Obama phones.
Obama
They're
phones.
everywhere.
Yeah,
you know, and that comes right out of your universal fee that you pay to the government and everybody's cell phone bill. And, you know, people aren't the wiser. They don't know. They just, oh, it's $3. Well, that's $3 from every cell phone customer.
Yeah.
And where does it end, though? You know, do we need to give everybody free airplane tickets, too?
So who's paying for it?
Exactly, we are.
The ones that work hard enough to
can
stay ahead of the system.
Right.
Now, let me ask you this. If the government doesn't have any food, there's no food reserve, and they've committed themselves with all of the people on food stamps that they're encouraging to get on food stamps before the election, obviously.
So they're eating so they can go vote.
You don't have to scream for very much transparency to wonder why everybody's being given food stamps before the election.
Right.
It doesn't take much transparency to know why everybody's being given phones that can't afford them before the election. I mean, connect the dots, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Okay, but you put this together. If you're aggravated as you look at your phone bill and say, oh, well, it's another $3, but you multiply it by the number of people that are paying for their phones, and some of them are struggling to pay for those phones because they need them to function. If you think that's aggravating to people, what's going to happen when those who are able to pay for the food, no matter how expensive it is, as it starts to disappear, find out that in order to feed the people that have been committed to that they will be fed, the food from these large supplies of food out here in the country is being taken from those who can afford it to give to those who are already on the system. So when the breadline starts and no one can afford food, guess who's going to be standing there? The people who are prudent enough to have their savings account, that were prudent enough to set aside a little bit of gold, that were prudent enough to have a retirement program, the disabled veterans with their meager little checks. And these people will be standing in line to get the food that they have been willing to pay for behind the people that are mandated to have the food that doesn't happen to go into the gas tanks
Of the cars. Yeah.
that we drive, that we can't afford to buy the gas to go to the grocery store to buy the food that we can't afford.
Exactly. And how's the government going to do it? They're going to executive order. They've already made these executive orders. They've been changed as they go through. We covered it in Police State 4. They have the ability to confiscate farm equipment, farms, food stocks, and they will just warehouse it all. And they will come in. They might even come into your business by government order with trucks and just start backloading it in there. And then what do, you know, hey, are you going to pay me for this food? Oh no, this is executive order. This is what you have to do.
Well, that particular executive order that you're talking about is a retreading of the executive order that we were all appalled at back a few years ago when Mr. Clinton signed that first executive order. Now it's just been kind of refurbished and re-edited and brought back out to
They call it reauthorization.
Oh,
we're going to reauthorize this and change a couple sentences here and mainly make it more totalitarian and shove it back in your face. That's how.
Well, let me tell you about a ladder. There's a ladder of human existence. When a baby is born, okay, it starts out, and what's the one function it has? What's job one for that baby? Everything that baby comes in contact with goes in the mouth, right?
Right.
Okay. What's the difference between that baby and someone who has just lost their job, or someone who is the recent victim of a national disaster or a natural disaster? What's the difference between that baby and a too much in debt yuppie executive that is just on a survival mode? The first rung of the survival ladder has to be food. And until that is taken care of, what we have is a situation where nobody can do anything. Now, let me give you some perfect examples. That's not just in this country. If you look at slavery, if you look at the feudal system, if you look at sharecroppers, and if you look at a totalitarian government that controls its people, what do they all control it with? Yeah. They control those people with food. If you can keep everyone at just the survival mode so that every waking hour...
On the brink of starvation.
Every waking hour is totally committed to just providing the food for that day. We've seen this happen in many of the Iron Curtain countries and all of the stuff. You see the poverty that's the result of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, and all this equalization so that everybody is equalized at a survival level so that they can't go to the next step. What's the baby do? It's on that bottom rung, hanging on for dear life, eating. Until that's taken care of, if that baby is standing in the crib crying for food, they aren't going to get to the point where they think. They aren't going to get to the point where they have emotions, where they start to have feelings and start to learn. They're going to stay right there until they get that solved.
And that's where the government wants you. That's where they like you. They don't want you questioning the system.
Rob, I'm not even going to say that. I'm just going to let all of your viewers draw their own conclusion.
All right.
That baby, that out-of-work engineer, that mom that's that single mom that's just trying to feed her 3 kids, and that disaster relief individual, they're all at the same spot. No matter where they climbed on the level of human progression and their development as an individual, to their creativity, to maximize their capability as a human being, whenever one of those situations hits, boom, they go right straight down to that bottom rung.
Right.
And that's where people no longer have the choice to think and feel and fight to retain their liberties and freedoms and become who they're capable of becoming.
Yeah.
They are literally at the survival level, and that's where people have to be.
Going back to that, I read a book, and it's basically a children's accounts of the Pol Pot regime, growing up in that they were, between the ages of 7 and 12. And they were brought into these camps, and they were forced to grow food. They were given a meager supply of rice. They were eating bugs. They were eating each other. It was truly horrifying to think, but they were on that one rung of the ladder, whereas before, their parents were, intelligent professors, doctors, whatever. They went into these towns, and just anybody who was smart, shoot the parents immediately, take the kids, put the kids in the fields. And it's scary to think that that could happen here at some point, and that people will be scrambling for food because as a result of a natural disaster, government collapse, a rolling situation complex of a lot of different things. I mean, it could be anything.
Let's take the ladder again.
Yeah.
Let's take the ladder again. 20,000 people a day in America are falling below the poverty line.
Right.
That means that you have people that have been, 5 years ago, were considered successful and doing well and prospering, and they had time to go play some golf, to go play softball, and do the various things that they do, and pretty soon that economic creeping, insidious cancer climbs up that ladder. And as each person is caught up with, in other words, as the economy failing catches up, we've got 20,000 people a day that are going from wherever they were on their ladder of progression, falling all the way down and grabbing hold of that bottom rung and hanging on, and they're at the point where the only thing that they can think of, the only thing that they can do, they aren't going to think about, how is my freedom being challenged? Had I better go down and do something about that, that congressman that voted the wrong way? No, they don't give a rat's butt about any of that stuff, because they're hanging on the bottom line rung of that ladder. And so what you've got is exactly going on in a more sophisticated, mundane way that doesn't seem so atrocious as the story about the children that you just told. But the fact is, it's happening to grown adults and full families daily in this country, because no matter how far we're up on the ladder, when that juggernaut that's rolling toward us and rolling over us catches up with you, you're down to that bottom rung. And it doesn't make any difference what you did yesterday, the day before, how successful you were, how much education you've got. We've got kids coming out of school, graduating at high levels within their classes, that can't find jobs because there are no businesses left to give them the jobs to work. And so where are they? They are no better off.
They're in debt.
Than the guy that's standing on a street corner, propped against his crutch, with a cardboard sign painted in his wife's lipstick that says, "A little bit of change will help." How much difference is there between that man and the baby in the crib and the mother that's feeding her children and those of us that are falling below that line? So here's the deal. If pork is disappearing, that's only the tip of the iceberg. When we get done dealing with what's going on in this 7th year of the worldwide famine in this country, where we have a food situation we've never experienced or imagined before, the only chance that people have is to put in a supply of food while they can still afford it, because the food that you're buying right now, the only reason you can still afford it is because it was purchased by the processors from last year's crop that they could still afford to buy the raw materials.
Right.
When those processors hit the October of this year and November of this year new pricing on the current raw materials, it's going to be a whole different ballgame. And you think that 20,000 families a day or individuals a day falling below the poverty line is serious? You ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
It's going to be about as insane as the idea that $3 off of your phone bill is going to provide somebody a phone. And who's paying for the services month to month? I don't know about that. We better check that out. If that aggravates you, $3 worth of aggravation, think about when all of these people that can't afford to buy food, that have been committed to that they'll be provided food, when your food is taken out of those huge warehouses and redistributed, and you're standing in the bread line behind
the people who already know the system.